Okay, Frankie.
Are we on, Mac?
Go ahead, Frankie.
Good morning. My name is Frank Lotierzo. Welcome to the inaugural broadcast of the Frank Lotierzo Boxing Show, yet to be named. I'm a former fighter, part-time writer, full-time observer, and today we're going to look back at some of the fights that happened this weekend. We're going to look back at the last 6 weeks as to what an incredible patch it has been for the sport of boxing, where we've seen some unification bouts, some good fights, some unexpected outcomes. And it's funny. I think of all 12 months of the year, if you go back and you look, I think there have been more big fights in the month of June than any other month. And here we are, we're coming to the end of June, and there are a couple big fights that anniversaries are around this time of year. Today is the 50th anniversary of the rematch between Muhammad Ali and Jerry Quarry. Some people think that was Ali's best fight of the 70s. Yesterday was the 50th anniversary, think of this, of Roberto Duran, hands of stone. You know, until January 26, 1972, before he fought Ken Buchanan, Roberto Duran really wasn't known that well in the States. He had fought at Madison Square Garden before that, but no one really gave him a shot to win the title against Ken Buchanan, and nobody predicted, even after that fight, which he went on the foul, that he would go on to be maybe the consensus best lightweight of all time. Also, today is the anniversary of Michael Spinks and Mike Tyson. Remember that 91-second blowout? Some people think that was Tyson's best night. I think Michael Spinks had a little bit to do with that. Today's also the anniversary of, I believe, Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson, the rematch, the earbite fight. And it's also the anniversary of Mike Tyson and Razor Ruddock, the rematch. They fought in March of 91, then they ran it back in June of 91. Tyson won both fights. But what we're going to do now, I'm going to talk about briefly two fights that maybe they weren't under the radar, but they were important. And that was the Rungvisai Bam Rodriguez 115-pound title fight. Now, everybody remembers Rungvisai because he's the guy that gave Chocolatito his first loss. He won a disputed decision the first time they fought, and then he knocked him out, I believe, in the 4th round of the rematch. And a lot of people thought Rungvisai was going to be an all-time great, maybe on a collision course with Inoue. It didn't happen. He was upset in a couple fights, and he's now 35 years old. He went into the fight with Bam Rodriguez 56-1 with 43 knockouts. But again, he's 35 years old. His best days were clearly behind him. His reflexes are diminished. But I don't want that to take away from what Rodriguez achieved. He's only 22 years old, 16-0, 11 knockouts. And I think that we're looking at a guy in Rodriguez who's a potential Hall of Famer. Early this year, we saw Inoue have a great fight with Nonito Donaire. Rodriguez's win was just as impressive, and here's why. In the Inoue Donaire fight, there was only one thing that Inoue had to do to beat Nonito. He had to get off first because they're both punchers. He knew that Nonito was going to take the fight to him. So if he could get there first with more, against an older guy like Denari. That's pretty much all he had to do. Where Bam Rodriguez, no, he had to dismantle Rungvisai. He had to give him angles. He had to box him. He had to punch when he felt it was his advantage. And he had to basically undress him and break him down. And he did that easily. He's no doubt the leading candidate for Fighter of the Year. If you remember, earlier this year, he fought a killer in Carlos Cudras on 6 days' notice and beat him. So what I see in Bam is he's a guy that he has a combination of ring IQ, natural talent, terrific technique, and I think he's already elite. And the thing is, he may even be favored because they're talking about him fighting Gonzalez and Estrada. He may be favored over both of them. He's beating top 5 guys at 115, and his real weight may be 108, 112. He would kill anybody in those divisions. Even him and Inoue would be an interesting fight, size notwithstanding. As great as he looked against Cordras, though, and he did look sensational, I don't know. The improvement that he made in that fight is remarkable in the course of a couple months. It's just very evident that he has all the makings of a terrific fighter. And he, it's fun. Another thing too, he barely got hit. He shook off all the punches that Rungvisai did manage to land. And I can't say enough good things about him. I think we may be looking at a Hall of Famer. The only thing I'd say in terms of being cautious is he is a little guy. He's still growing, and you might want to be careful with who you match him with on how far up you go as far as weight goes. But he's definitely a fighter to watch, and I think right now, as we speak on June 27th, I believe that he has 2 big wins. Nobody else has that this year, and I think we're looking at a Hall of Fame fighter perhaps down the road, and he will be in some big fights. There was another big fight on the undercard of that, and that was WBA IBF champ, super bantamweight champion Mirand Akhmadiev, 11-0, 8 KOs. He stopped Ronnie Rios, 33-4, 16 KOs in the 12th round to retain his titles on Saturday night at the Tech Port Arena in San Antonio. Akhmadiev overcame a hand injury to drop Rios in the final round. Rios beat the count. Then Akhmadiev pounced on him, and the referee stopped the bout at 206. It was the right call. And now there's talk of Akhmadiev against Philly's Stephen Fulton, who is also being mentioned as a guy who could fight Inoue. So that basically covered the weekend. Those were the 2 high-profile fights. I don't know how much attention they got with the great weather, but we'll be seeing them down the road in some big fights. Also, this week, we saw the beginning of the press conferences of 2 huge fights that are going to round out what you could make a case as being perhaps the 2 best months in boxing that we've seen in a long time. Now, the one fight, which is going to be August 20th, is Alexander Usyk against Anthony Joshua. September 17th, and that's a rematch. September 17th is the 3rd Canelo-Golovkin fight. Now, they fought 2 times, both decisions. The first fight was a draw. Most people felt that Golovkin won. Second fight was a little closer. Canelo got the nod, but you can make a case in the 24 rounds that they fought that Golovkin has had the better of it. But before I touch on them, let's just go back to May 8th and think about the high-profile fights and good fights that we've had just in less than 8 weeks. We go back to May 8th. We saw Dimitri Bivol fight Canelo Alvarez. Alvarez is the undisputed junior super middleweight champion at 168. Bivol has the WBA light heavyweight title. Now, Canelo is a controversial guy. A lot of people like to pick on him. They think he picks his spots. They think he cherry picks like Mayweather. And I do think there is validity to that argument. However, we have to call it the way we see it. Canelo did not cherry pick against Bivol. Bivol going into that fight was the consensus second best light heavyweight in the world who was undefeated. And there were even talk, or there was some talk and speculation that he may even be better than Arturo Beterbiev, until Beterbiev fought later on and looked just as impressive, maybe even more. But Canelo fought a guy who was clearly bigger than him, has a style that has always troubled him. He didn't make him come in at a catch weight. He didn't put a limit on his rehydration. So Canelo, all the things that fighters do when they move up and fight a bigger guy, the one thing they do is, or they make them suck down and wait, knowing they can't recover. That's a gimmick, and it's a way to level the field. Canelo didn't do that. He has to get credit for that. He took on the legitimate second best light heavyweight in boxing. Now, he lost a 12-round unanimous decision. All three judges scored at 115, 113. I think it was a little bit more lopsided than that. I had it 117, 111. But in the main, Bivol had an answer for everything Canelo tried, outboxed him every turn, and everything Canelo had been vulnerable to before, Bivol fed him a steady diet of it. And what we saw in that fight was an elite light heavyweight, not drained by a catchweight, was a bridge too far for Canelo. The following weekend, May 14th, had a doubleheader. Guy by the name of Jaron Boots Ennis, a surging welterweight from Philadelphia. He fought a guy named Castillo Clayton. Ennis KO'd Clayton in 2 rounds. Okay, now I've heard a lot of people say Ennis hasn't fought anybody. They've said that about Sugar Ray Leonard on the way up, Roy Jones, Muhammad Ali, Oscar De La Hoya. They always say that. But here's the thing with Ennis. You can look at him and your eyes don't lie. He can box. He can switch. He can go from either side like Terrence Crawford, and he's every bit as effective from either side. He can punch. He's mean. He doesn't give a damn about the other guy in the other corner. He is coming, and I believe, and I will say this, and I may be wrong. Somebody may play this tape back and some other tapes I've said this on. I believe because of the emergence of Boots Ennis, Terrence Crawford and Earl Spence are going to get off their rear ends, and they're going to fight this year. We have 6 months left for that to pan out. And the reason why I think that will be is because these guys are smart. Everybody in boxing knows about Ennis. They know how good he is. They know he has a style where he can pretty much adapt to his opponent's style regardless of who they are. And here's the thing. Crawford and Spence have yet to have that signature fight. They're both outstanding talents. They've both been champ for a long time. Crawford unified the 140-pound title. He had a title at 135, and he won the WBA welterweight title in his first fight. Spence has been tearing through the welterweight division. He has 3 belts. However, neither one of them are really outstanding personalities. They really haven't been tested. They've been tested against elite guys, but they've never faced anybody as good as each other. And they haven't had that big payday. If they fight, the winner will be the undisputed welterweight champion. And that puts them in elite company. And nobody will question their opposition. However, if they don't fight each other, one of them is going to have to defend their title against Boots. And the way I see it is, if they do that, They are as liable to lose to Boots as they are each other. And that would be a colossal mistake because the money won't be as good. They will be defeated by a guy who isn't as big of a name as they are and hasn't been in with the people that they have been in. And it just would not be a good look. Where the winner between Spence and Crawford, he's unified. He has a signature win, a legacy win, and he can move up in weight and conquer and try to conquer the junior middleweight division. And both guys, if Spencer Crawford did that, they would have they'd be in the running to fight Jermell Charlo very soon, maybe after just one win in the division. And speaking of Charlo, on the undercard, Charlo stopped Brian Castano in the 10th round of their rematch in the main event. Now, they fought prior to that, and the fight ended in a draw. People have been arguing about who won that fight up until the night of the rematch, and Charlo became the undisputed junior middleweight champ when he stopped Castano in the 10th round. And I'll say this about Charlo. Has a great jab. He can punch. He's mean. He showed that if you go after him, you will walk into a brick. And if you let him come after you, if you try to box him on the outside, he will force you to fight. And that's exactly what he wants. And that plays into his hands. So we have Jermell Charlo as the unified junior middleweight champion. Nobody disputes that he's the best junior middleweight in the world. And think about this. If the winner of Crawford and Spence fights him, that's a monumental fight because the other guys bring the same cachet, and he will be fighting a guy who was unified one class below him, 7 pounds. That's not a big jump for either Spence or Crawford, although I do believe Spence probably fits the division better because Spence, let's face it, Crawford turned pro at 135. Spence turned pro at 147. So Spence is clearly the bigger guy. Now, a week later, the guy that everybody wants to see fight Canelo at super middleweight, Jesse Benavidez, he stopped David Lemieux. The fight wasn't much of a fight, but there was anticipation over it because Benavidez is big time. Lemieux has been in there with Billy Joe Saunders and Golovkin, and he's been in there with, the who's who of the 160 to 168 pounders, and he didn't compete. Yeah, he's a little long in the tooth, but he didn't compete. Benavidez took him apart in 3 rounds, as most expected. Lemieux's corner stopped to stop the fight. Benavidez was methodical, exhibiting a very imaginative offense and controlled aggression. And he's also a great finisher and really ups the rent when his opponent is in trouble. The fight that people want to see at 168 is Canelo versus Benavidez, assuming Canelo can get by Golovkin in September. But I'd also like to see him fight Jermell Charlo, who does a lot of talking but no fighting. The following week, May 29th, Gervonta Tank Davis scored a 1-punch knockout over Rolly Romero in the 6th round. Not an easy fight. Romero is very strong, a good puncher, really aggressive, awkward, uses a lot of rough tactics, and the size disparity was obvious. Tank fought strategically well and was waiting for Romero to wind down a little bit before testing him. But what I mean by that is when Romero was on his game and had all his energy and confidence, he was right there with Tank. But Tank had to use the Larry Holmes tactic, take him out to deep water, drown him, and set him up. Stopped him with a beautiful shot. The end came out of nowhere. He caught Romero getting reckless with his overhand right twice. Tank timed the second one perfectly and stepped in with his own left. Romero beat the count, but he was done. Tank's a comer, and Tank is one of the 3 best punchers in the game. Following week, this is crazy. I know, it sounds like a repeat. June 5th, another top lightweight, Devin Haney, wins a unanimous decision over George Kambosos to become the undisputed 4-belt lightweight champ. Haney fought a textbook perfect fight, was a step ahead of Kambosos at every turn. Devin's jab and 1-2 were on point. He impeded Kambosos' aggression, or I should say attempted aggression. In addition to that, Haney prevented Kambosos from trading hooks and uppercuts by using his reach, jabbing to the body, and not waiting and reacting. Haney was masterful in preventing Kambosos from luring him into a dogfight, nullifying any chance he had to win. I scored at 118-110 for Haney, and as I inferred before the fight, Haney was the more gifted fighter, and Kambosos was a bit overrated off of beating Teofimo Lopez. And sometimes that happens. If you remember when Buster Douglas beat Mike Tyson? All of a sudden, Buster Douglas was great, and a lot of people were picking him over Evander Holyfield in his next fight when he really hadn't shown that. I remember having a conversation with Bert Sugar about the fight, and when I said, who are you going to take? He said, I'm going to take Douglas over Holyfield. I said, why? He says, we beat Tyson. I said, okay, but Tyson and Holyfield fight nothing alike. I says, let me ask you this. If Douglas was fighting Holyfield before he fought Tyson, who would you pick? And he said, Holyfield. I said, so you're going to change everything we know about Buster Douglas in one fight based off of beating Mike Tyson, who may have been a little overrated. You're going to change that off of that one fight and go with Douglas. And we know what happened. Holyfield got him in 3 rounds. A couple days later, June 7th, the monster, Inoue Inoue, demolishes Denari in 2 rounds, and that was a rematch of their first fight that went the distance. Inoue dropped Denari at the end of the first round. Both guys came out bobbing in the second. Inoue's punches were just much straighter, more precise, and he was patient even while trading with Denaire, so he got there first. Denaire tried to land some huge shots, winging punches, so Inoue briefly went downstairs. Still respectful in Inoue's power, he never got careless, opened up, landed some beautiful combinations, and finished him with a perfect left hook to the temple. Inoue may be one of the best finishers in boxing. The knockout punch may have ended any fight. No count given or needed. The ref stopped it right time. Great fight for as long as it lasted, and one of the best performances you'll ever see. Inoue is now 16-0 with 14 knockouts in title fights, and we're going to see him either against maybe Stephen Fulton down the road, maybe Chocolatito, but there are some big fights for Inoue. The question with Inoue is, how far up in weight can he go? Following weekend, Inoue's fight was Tuesday. On Saturday night, we saw a unification light heavyweight bout between Artur Beterbiev, 18-0. He's now 18-0, 18 knockouts. He beat Joe Smith, 28-4, who entered 27-3, 22 knockouts. He had Smith down at the end of the first round. And basically, this was a fight where Beterbiev, believe it or not, actually outboxed Smith. He let Smith go to him, took advantage of his reckless aggression, and he just turned out to be the more polished, better guy. I thought Smith had a shot going in, but you could just see Beterbiev is a beast. It was the best tactical fight of his career, and Smith really isn't on his level. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Joe Smith. And that pretty much wraps up to where we are as far as the big fights. Now, as of June 27th, there's not that much going on. The next big fight is, and I'm going to go back to what I talked about earlier, it's going to be the Joshua Usyk rematch. That will be on August 20th. In their last fight, last September, Usyk fought the perfect fight, and there's not one thing he needs to change. We don't know what the war with Russia, him being a Ukrainian, has done to him, but from what I've seen, he looks like he's in great shape. He looks focused. I think with the blessing of the president, he wants to give the people of Ukraine something to cheer for and show that those people are champions. Usyk, all he has to do, show up, be in shape, and do what he's done every fight of his career. Whereas Joshua has to have a mindset that if there's a 7th round, he's going to lose, so he has to go for broke. And the reason for that is Usyk is a better boxer than Joshua. I think he's tougher mentally. He's better. Joshua is not as well conditioned because Joshua goes up in weight. One fight he wants to be big and a bodybuilder. The next day he wants to be Sugar Ray Leonard. However, Joshua's body is capable of beating Usyk's as long as he can process it up here. What he has to do is he has to make it a street fight. He has to make it where Usyk is either fighting it out with him, holding him so they can't fight, or using his legs to get away. And every second that's not happening, Usyk is winning the fight. But Joshua, I think, has trepidation. I really do. I think he has trepidation and he lacks a little bit of confidence. So as of right now, I can't see anything changing where I would make a case for Joshua to win. September 17th, end of the summer, almost a couple days before fall. Canelo Golovkin 3. Canelo's 57, 2-2, 39 knockouts. He will be 32 when they get in the ring. Golovkin, who just turned 40, is 42, 1-1 with 37 knockouts. Now look at Golovkin's record. 42, 1-1. The 1-1 are Canelo. So if you take Canelo out of the picture, Golovkin has not been defeated. Some question his opposition, which is legit, but he can only fight who's out there. In the 24 rounds, think about this. Canelo is the much bigger personality and star. Think of this. In the 24 rounds they fought, okay, I had Golovkin winning the first fight 8-4. I had Canelo winning the rematch 6-5-1. If you take the cumulative scores of their two fights, in my opinion, Golovkin has the edge, 13, 10-1. But Golovkin is maybe catching Canelo at the right time because I really do think after watching Bivol handle Canelo, I think in his mind, I think Golovkin gained a little confidence. And I think he learned some things from that fight because if you think about it, Bivol basically controlled the fight with a jab. Golovkin has a terrific jab. Now, Canelo is more of an attacker than Bivol, but I think what he may have picked up in that fight is what Bivol did. He worked Canelo back with the jab, pushed him back, and he only traded with him in spurts against the ropes or in the corner. So he didn't really give him a chance to have a slugfest. Canelo is very good at that. I think there's a chance that maybe Golovkin looks at that and says, maybe I don't have to knock him out. And maybe I can just do that. I can control the fight with my jab, try to get some big shots when I have him backed up. And that might be my ticket to get it done. And I also think Canelo has something to prove. I think age is a factor. Maybe them fighting at 168 instead of 160 is an issue. And I think Golovkin has some things going for him. If I had to pick right now, I would take Canelo. But I have to admit, it's not quite as strong as it was before. That's it for this edition of maybe what might become the 13th round. My name is Frank Lotierzo. Tune in tonight to watch myself and co-host Jack Hirsch on Glove Fist, and we'll take things a little bit deeper and discuss some other fights.
Go Big Blue, New York Giants. Go Big Blue, Super Bowl Giants. Go Big Blue, New York Giants. New York and New Jersey, going crazy. Big Blue, Super Bowl baby. G Nation, stand proud. From the heart, shout it out loud now. Go Big Blue, go Giants. Go Big Blue, New York Giants. Go Big Blue, Super Bowl Giants. Go Big Blue, go Giants. Ground and pound, air it out. Top of the world, talk of the town. Hey, do you believe it now? Do you believe it now? Go Big Blue, go Giants.
There you go, folks. How you doing today? I am Macman with the Big Blue Avenue. I got this picture up here right now to ask a question of you. You know, to say something about all these great defensive lines we had. You know, we had a bunch of great lines. You know, we've had the fierce